Hello. Namaste. I almost didn't come here today. I told Diane that I intended to, and then my significant other headed to visit his daughter at Iowa and see the game. He had 40-yard line tickets, and I said, no, I think my highest and best use is to go and find out about this group. So he said, seriously? And I said, seriously. He said, go with God, babe, go with God. So here I am, unexpectedly talking to you. Diane said, tell him where you were before the near death, tell him the near death, and I don't know what happens after that, so let's just go. At 6 years old, I can remember skipping down a street that was about the same steepness as this aisle right here, skipping, throwing my arms in the air, filled with the joy of being alive, absolutely certain. I was in conversation with someone or something, didn't know what, didn't know who, and just thought, man, life is good at 6. I just woke up every day feeling like life was wonderful. And not long after that, I found myself sitting under a tree with my baby Patibert. Those of you who grew up in the 60s might remember her as Mattel's technological marble doll of the 60s. If you held her to your shoulder and patted her back, eventually, at uneven intervals, she would burp like a real baby. And it was fascinating and wonderful. And she had a cotton body and hard plastic arms, legs, and head. And inside her body was this little mechanism that would make her burp. Now I have to back up just a second to tell you that, and this will sound completely irrelevant, but nothing's ever irrelevant. Know that my sister, who was 2 years older, was born with a birthmark right in the middle of her tummy, a big brown, oddly shaped, conspicuous birthmark in the middle of her tummy. And she went on to be a great maven of public relations and announced to all of us on our block that only the coolest kids have birthmarks. To the point that we believed her and we started searching our own bodies for similar evidence of coolness, none of which I had. But keep that in the back of your mind as we proceed. So here I am sitting under a tree at age 6 with baby Patibert and my jump rope. I do not know what that combo platter was all about. And the neighborhood bully came along and used my own jump rope to hang me from that tree by my neck.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt about it, actually. And he took baby Patibert, my perfectly peachy, beautiful baby Patibert, who burped at uneven intervals, just like a real baby. And he threw her in the creek that ran behind our houses, face down, and then he left. And I remember this very clearly. I think what kept me alive in that circumstance was, ironically, baby Patibert, because I thought, wow, she drew the shorter straw. Because I was just hanging from a tree, but she was face down in water. She was drowning, and I was her mother, and it was my job to take care of her, and look at what had happened. But I was twisting from the tree, pushing off with my fingertips. The way the noose was around my neck, like the toes of my little rubber-toed kids could just barely touch the ground. And I was pushing against the tree. That is the reason there are shoes on the front of my book, because I am a shoe fiend to this day. Because of that, I have a great affinity for shoes, acquiring them, maintaining them. I even have a closet, floor-to-ceiling closet in my condo devoted entirely to shoes. And there's a little plaque up next to it that says, "One shoe can change your life, Cinderella." And in my case, the shoe that changed my life were little red, round, rubber-toed kids. Because I'm hanging from that tree, twisting, and the noose is getting tighter, and I'm aware that I'm in a conversation with that same mysterious something that's saying, everything will be all right. This is okay. You will be all right. I feel like I'm going to throw up, but the noose is too tight around my little neck, and it's rubbing rope burns in my neck, and I think I'm going to throw up, but I can't because the noose holds my stomach contents down and holds my little chin up, and I'm pushing, writhing, and seeing baby Patibert down there drowning, and my dad, who just happened to come home, providentially, by a stroke of divine intervention, happened to come home the opposite way he normally would have. The tree was, we lived on a U. We lived up at the top of the U, and the tree was here, and the street connected to this main street on the other side. My dad would always, like a smart man, would come in, because there were tons of kids on our block. He would come in the easiest way, so we wouldn't have to navigate around the kids. So he would normally just have parked right in our driveway. Instead, for some reason he cannot to this day explain, he drove past our street, came down the other way, went past the tree, and noticed over his shoulder 2 little red things hanging from a tree. And they were my kids. And he noticed that those little red things were connected to legs, connected to a body pushing against that tree. And that was me. And he threw the car into park, blew out the door, and came and got me down from the tree, and saved my life, obviously. And all the time I was hanging there, I was in conversation with what I believe is now the larger, I now believe, or have come to understand, is the larger universe, a consciousness beyond myself. And my dad gets me down, and I'm wailing. Now I'm wailing like crazy. I was completely without fear the whole time I was hanging from the tree. Just, this isn't good, clearly this is not a good thing, but I wasn't afraid. But then once my dad appeared and I was out of danger, then the fear arrived. And I started wailing, and I couldn't talk because I was so out of breath, but my dad finally got me to calm down by whispering, which is a great parental thing that too few of us use as parents. If you whisper, your kid has to be quiet and listen to what you're trying to say. And finally he said, stop, calm down, tell me what's the matter. And I said, it's baby Fatima, Daddy, she's drowning, save her, Daddy. And we didn't have a lot of money in those days, and my dad had his salesman's wingtips on and his best salesman's business suit. And do you think that bothered him at all? Absolutely not. He charged right into that creek and picked up that mucky old doll, dripping and disgusting. She'd soaked up, in the book I call it, every malodorous microorganism our sewer system could cough up. And out she came, and I was okay. I mean, imagine what he must have thought. He must have thought my sister Kathy was hanging somewhere from another tree. What has happened on Fernbrook Drive to unleash this ridiculous turn of events, outrageous turn of events? I'll spare you what happens between the bully's dad and my dad, because that really doesn't matter. My dad, no, I mean seriously, because my dad chose to focus on what mattered most to him. My dad, the Eagle Scout, decided what needs to happen here. And it was that he could not allow his daughter to grow up feeling like a victim of a crime. He had to figure out how to put that day's events into a good light for me. So he took me home, and he sat me down on a little stool in front of our washing machine while he set the knobs and filled the basin, or the whatever, tub with detergent, and put baby Patibert in there, and talked about all the fun she would have. And he said, now you let me know when she'll be fine, you let me know when the cycle stops. So I let him know, and he moves my stool over in front of the dryer, and he takes her out, and she's still just nasty, ugly. We didn't have OxyClean or all of that in those days. So he takes a big whip. Oh, she already smells better. She'll be fine, Downy brush, yay. Tosses her into the dryer, closes it, and around she goes, because her hard parts are hitting the edges of the dryer, making a tremendous noise. And I'm listening to this, and he opens the dryer. By then, cotton batting, when it gets dried suddenly, my doll's like this. And her head and her elbows and her knees are all barked up and a little bit melty. Just word to the wise, tumble dry low when you're drying babies who have just cheated death. So my dad takes her out of the dryer and holds her up, using his big daddy hand to kind of cover the worst of her stains. And he said, I said, she's ruined, Daddy, she's ruined. Oh no, she's not ruined. And I'm like, Dad, I'm sitting right here, she's ruined, she's ruined. Oh no, Kelly, she's not ruined. You're the luckiest little girl on the block. You're the luckiest little girl on the block because you have a doll with birthmarks. And I'm thinking, yeah, well played, Dad. Anybody can have a sister with a big old birthmark, but only I have a doll with a birthmark, right? So I'm just about ready to swallow up this tale he's told me. No, she's ruined, Daddy. She's ruined. My dad's like, no, what, you know, what are you saying? She's ruined. She won't ever burp again. And my dad still holding her up like Simba in the Lion King, you know, up above. And I'm down here looking at her, and he says, oh, Kelly, a baby who can't burp needs extra love. And that's why God sent this baby to you. Hands me my doll. He's an Eagle Scout boy. He's a hero dad, and he's fighting cancer right now for the 5th time. This man has beaten it 5 times, and 5 times he's going to beat it again, I'm telling you, because he believes he will. And he said, I want to live to see the book come out. And I said, oh, want a little longer than that. Make that deal, baby, because it's going to take me forever to get that book out if that's the deal you've made with the universe. So, he's an amazing dad. So fast forward a bit, I was, as a kid, hanged from a tree. The same year, I was struck by a car, no harm done. Let's go forward. Let's see. Encountered some difficulties in my teen years, and I'll leave that for you to read if you care to, or watch me be interviewed somewhere great, maybe here. It's already happening. Whoa! I've imagined this, which is so wonderful. I mean, this is like the fulfillment of a dream, and this is great. So anyway, okay. So fast forward until I am 29 years old. Or actually 28, I'll say. I was at a park here, I lived in Evanston, and I was at a park with a friend of mine, Ginny, and we had 2-year-old daughters at the time. We put them in the swing. They'd gone to playgroup, so they're like, and we stop at the park just so we can chat, the 2 of us, and we put them in the swings, and they're back and forth, which gives moms some time to chat. And my friend Ginny, whose husband spent most of his professional life in Japan. He would go for months at a time and then only come back for a couple of weeks and then he'd be gone again. So she has 2 kids. She has an older son, Fritz, and her daughter, Jane, who's 2, my daughter's age. My daughter's Libby. And they're swinging. And she said, do you realize if anything happened to us right now, our kids wouldn't remember anything about us? Whoa. No, I hadn't thought of it. She goes, well, think about it. I mean, what do you even remember? I bet you don't remember anything even from middle school. I was like, well, actually, I had a kind of a tumultuous childhood. So I do remember quite a bit. But I didn't argue with her because she was asking her questions of me rhetorically. I was sure she was just an exhausted mom. And I got to thinking, though, I thought, I'm 28 years old. I don't think about checking out anytime soon. I don't think about my daughter not remembering me. And I think she was thinking of it from the other perspective. Is she was thinking how unfair it was that we were doing all of this stuff for our kids at this age and they wouldn't remember any of it. And I was thinking, I'm so young, I'm not going to die. But Ginny and I co-produced a newsletter a parenting newsletter for an organization, I don't even know if it still exists, Parents Concern here in Evanston. And every month we did 16 pages. We did that together, and in fact it was at Ginny's house that I was struck by lightning. We were working against a deadline in a thunderstorm. Don't ever do that, it's really, really stupid. But based on her question, I started keeping a journal. I thought I wanted to leave, if God forbid anything happened to me, right, that I wanted my daughter to know something about herself, her ancestors, me, if I didn't live to tell her myself. And I decided that would be perfect to put in this Parents Concern newsletter. So I wrote a series of articles, one of which was called A Test of Wills, about leaving my daughter a kind of a financial legacy of the paperwork, getting all the paperwork done relative to the practical things that you need to think about. But then I wanted to leave her a philosophical legacy as well. And in the midst of that, I was nudged by many different places, sources at the same time. Listen to that when it happens, because if somebody if you get nudged, like at the dentist's office, I sat there and there was an article about journaling, and my insurance company, since its quarterly magazine out, which I never ever read, and for some reason I found myself reading it, and it talked about the value of journaling. And I thought, why would an insurance company, Carol? Of course, they're like, because if you die, you know, it'll be a great comfort to your family to have your words recorded. Well, what they really meant is buy some life insurance because you're gonna die. But I was like, why would they care if I keep a journal? Everywhere. And then a class I was taking at my church was on journaling. I thought, okay, I'll keep a journal. And the title of the second article in the series was, and it's very grim, and I apologize, I was a young journalist, just forgive me. What will my daughter know of me if I die before she's 3? Which I considered way better than what will your daughter know of you if you die before she's 2. So, yeah, on the scale of things of bad headlines, that was not as bad as it could have been, right? Okay, so about a year later, not even a year, maybe 8 or 9 months, so I started journaling. And sometimes I just used a calendar that just, because you're, as a mom of a toddler, you're tired. And so I would just write a new food she had tried and then a face to go with the reaction. So I would write in one square of a calendar per day, and then apparently I took my journaling seriously enough. I have Rubbermaid bins filled with stuff no one will ever want to read, but I took my assignment seriously enough that I produced I killed a few trees over it. Okay, so 8 or 9 months later, I start developing a very troubling symptom for a almost 29-year-old, and that was rectal bleeding. And remember, this was 1989, so every pharmaceutical company on earth was not regaling us with the side effects of their latest products. So rectal bleeding was not yet ready for its close-up by any stretch of the imagination. I knew it wasn't good, but I didn't know it was, I just thought, ooh, ick. So cacophony of doctors on vacation and misreferrals, that kind of thing. I end up with a doctor who needs to come back in the next life practicing medicine better than he did in this one. I named him in the book Dr. Dolt, just so I don't have to look at his name. And where I love him as much as I love anyone, I guess, he just put some roadblocks in my path. So I end up in Evanston Hospital after 8 months. He kept saying, sit on ice cubes, sit on ice cubes. You have internal hemorrhoids. And I said, wouldn't I know if I have hemorrhoids? And he said, because I didn't even have them when I was pregnant. He said, not necessarily, they might be internal. So I said, okay. He said, sit on ice cubes. So my ex-husband and I affectionately referred to that as the Ice Age, or as the year I was frigid. And I would keep my ice packs separated very nicely in our freezer. We call them assicles. So I kept calling. He said, so I called. It was getting worse, and I was now starting to have additional symptoms. And I said, something is really, really wrong. Now I'm losing a lot of blood. He said, how much is a lot? I mean, just a couple drops can seem like a lot. He said, call me if it gets to be a cup a day. And I said, do you put a measuring cup down there? I don't. So it was just really bad. And this is a lesson in not looking at somebody's walls covered with diplomas and deciding they know more about you. Because that was part of, doctors know what they're doing, and they know, but I knew what was happening on some level, not on a right here level, but at some level I knew better than he did. But ultimately, fast forward to April of 1990, and I've now been in the hospital for 5 weeks. And I said, oh, back up a little bit. This is kind of fun and cool. I had a job, I'm in public relations, or was for a long time, but one of my first jobs out of college was for the healthcare group at one of the world's largest PR firms. And I had to work on a product called Early Detector, an in-home test for colorectal cancer, which was a much nicer way of finding out if you had a symptom of colorectal cancer than the old way. And I hated the job, hated it. Had to call people like Johnny Carson's producer and say, wouldn't you like to have our spokesperson, Otto Graham, famous Cleveland Browns quarterback, come on your show, talk about his football career and the colostomy he wouldn't have needed if he had had our product? John, you never saw him on The Tonight Show, though, so let's just be clear, I did not succeed in that professional endeavor. However, I learned tons about colons, and rectums more than any 28-year-old or 23-year-old at that point wanted to know. So it was a horrific job, but the universe, pay attention, because the universe provides you with what you need to know way before you need to know it. And the things we tend to rail against most tend to be the things we need most urgently to learn. So 5 years later, I find myself in Evanston Hospital. I arrive with horrific symptoms. They don't know what's going on. They put me in isolation, and my ex-husband said they could only slide pizza and pancakes. That's the only thing they brought you from the hospital cafeteria, because it's the only thing they could slide under your door, because nobody wanted, they thought, does she have an infectious disease? We don't know. And then they're like, no, we don't think that's it. So the next day they'd come in not wearing scrubs, and then the next day they'd come in all covered up, because they thought, I mean, just ridiculous. But you don't know what you have. And I went into the hospital saying, take out my colon. They said, you don't know what you're saying. I said, actually, I do. I know quite a lot about colons. And they said, oh, but you're a young woman, and that's a drastic lifestyle change. I said, I'm dying. That's the most drastic lifestyle change there is. Take out my colon. They weren't convinced. Dr. Dolt had his own ideas. And, you know, so 5 weeks into my hospital stay, they come to me and they say, Kelly, we don't know why, but your colon is trying to kill you. We think you have 48 hours to live. So you need to say your goodbyes to your husband and your daughter, because we don't think you're going to make it. And so I had written pretty religiously in those calendars and journals, and was at a pretty good comfort level in terms of feeling like my daughter was somewhat prepared. But when you're faced with that urgent task, and I thought, say my goodbyes. If I say my goodbyes, my friend Ginny had already informed me she won't remember anything about me. So what do? So I say to my ex, I want you to go to Walgreens for me. He says, oh, Kel, I don't think Walgreens has anything that's going to help you now. I said, no. If I'm going to write my last words, I want it to be in something dignified and permanent looking. I want you to get me one of those black and white speckled composition notebooks, you know, with the binding on the edge. Now imagine, it had to be the most horrific trip to Walgreens anyone's ever taken, really, because he knows he's going to pick up what will contain his dying wife's last words. But he gets there, goes through his task, arrives, and he has a notebook sort of held to his chest, and I can see he has failed to bring me what I have asked for. But I can't tell you, and he turns it around and shows me it is not the black and white speckled notebook for which I had yearned in my last hours. Instead, I said, what part of dignified did you not understand? It's a safari Barbie notebook with Barbie in a loincloth bikini, swinging on a vine, with her jewels and makeup perfect, and her hair coiffed. And I said, seriously? And he said, finest moment, if you're going to die, you're going to die the way you lived. With a smile on your face. Anything you have to say to us, you can say in this safari Barbie notebook. Brilliant stroke, right? Perhaps not original to him. I don't know. In fact, it's interesting to hear how people interpret that, because I thought it was the finest thing he ever said, and it made me see who I was right up to the very end. He helped me. He validated the way I lived, which was with a smile on my face. He was right. A friend of mine heard that story years later, and she said, I don't think that's great. I don't think it's kind. I don't think it's wonderful. I think he was trying to control you to the very end. He wouldn't even grant you your dying wish. And you know what? We're both right. We are. So I make it my mission for the next 48 hours to write everything I want my daughter to know about me if I don't live to tell her myself. 9 single-spaced pages, the contents of which I do not even share in my book, because I urge you, as legacy leavers, to decide what you want to be in your last 9 pages, and I hope you don't have to write them as urgently as I did. But I will tell you, 10 years later, on my 30th birthday, on the 10th anniversary of my Bright Light experience, I sat down with my daughter and we read the contents of that notebook together. And it probably won't surprise you to know, but it usually surprises more typical audiences to know that much of what I tried to prepare my daughter for in that notebook, she had experienced. So it was, in my view, what that says is not even the universe's own self knew what might happen in that circumstance. I think what it means is we have such pure free will that the universe didn't know what I would do, what a doctor would do, whether they would bring the right thing or not bring the right thing. Dr. Dolt came to me, urging me, asking me, please, I want you to, I want you to consider this experimental treatment. And this was, I was working on that Safari Barbie notebook, had it open on my hospital table, and he came in and he said, I want you to consider this experimental treatment. And I said, okay. And I said, treatment for what? We don't know what I have, do we? And he said, well, I've said all along, I think you have Crohn's disease. And I was like, hold the phone. And by then, I had my voice. It was like, I'm dying. I'm holding nothing back, buckaroo. And I said, wait a minute, aren't you the guy who said 8 months ago it was nothing, then it was hemorrhoids, then it was some bug I picked up in Mexico, then it was, and you were certain of all these things, and now you're saying you've said all along that it was Crohn's disease? Well, that was really, and even weeks before that, I had seen him standing next to my bedside telling impressionable residents, when one of them suggested, could it be Crohn's disease? And he said, no, because Crohn's presents in the small intestine and she has it in her large intestine. Whatever she has, it's in her large intestine. So he had dismissed Crohn's, and I remember that. So I said, treatment, an experimental treatment for what? Yeah. And he said, well, I believe you have Crohn's disease. And I said, okay, if that's what we agree to agree, how many people have tried this? How many people have you tried this on? And he said, myself, none. I said, okay, how many people in the world have ever had this treatment tried on them? He said, 5. I said, how many of them are still alive? He said, well, we don't like to talk in terms of those statistics. I said, they're all dead, aren't they? And he said, well, yes. But I really wish you would consider this. And I said, he said, as if this would persuade me in his direction. He says, we'll even airlift you to Rush Presbyterian, where they've done it on 2 people before. And I said, they're dead, right? Well, yeah. And I said, why would I want to fly? If I have, as you say now, way less than 48 hours to live, would I want to fly away from my family? And he said, how do you, would I survive the flight? Well, we're not even sure you would. And he said, but I think we can get you stable. And I said, you can't get me stable here on the ground. What makes you think you can get, I just really wish you'd consider it. And he takes this, and the papers he wants me to sign say that no one will be morally, medically, financially, or in any other way responsible if it doesn't go well. And so and he's putting this on top of the sacred words I am recording to my daughter. I mean, understand the weight of that. And my dad, having been a salesman, taught me a thing or two, and I knew that in that moment, the person who talks next loses. Yeah? So I chose not to say anything, and I just pushed his papers back toward him, and he chose to lose. He said, you know, Kelly, we all want to win the Nobel Prize. Wow. I said, no, doctor. And I grabbed his stethoscope and a bit of his coat, and I pulled his face to me with every little bit of strength I had left in my body. And I said, no, doctor, some of us just want to live long enough to send our daughters to kindergarten. Get out of my room. Good. I thought I'd heard the last of him, because wouldn't you think? So I go back to my urgent task. 30 minutes later, I see him outside my door, 2 lab coats outside the door. He's chatting. the way they do in the hall. They used to before HIPAA. Now they're a little better about that. But he sees me and he steps away so I can't see him through the door. A few minutes later, the gentleman with whom he's talking comes in, and I don't know him. He's someone I've never seen, and he says, I forget the name I give him in the book because I don't even remember his real one. Oh, Dr. Pawn, because he was used for Dr. Dolt to make his move. And he says, I'm Dr. Pawn. Dr. Dolt sent me in because I'm a psychiatrist. And he sent me in because he's concerned you're not considering your medical options clearly. I said, okay, let's review. You can do nothing, and I will die in 24 hours or less. You can airlift me across town for an experimental treatment that has never worked on anyone ever, and I will die probably in less than 24 hours. Or you can take out my colon, a surgery for which I have been asking since I got here, and that is the one shot I have at living to see my daughter go to kindergarten. Would you say I am considering my options clearly? Yes, I guess I would. So he reaches into his lab coat pocket and pulls out what appears to be a prescription pad, and he starts to write. He said, I'd like to give you something to help you sleep. I said, doctor, if someone told you you had 48 hours to live, would you want to spend any of them sleeping? Get out of my room! So they decide, okay, they need to do one last scope to see if there's anything they can do, what is really going on in there. They use a pediatric scope because they're afraid they'll perforate my colon. As it turns out, they shouldn't have feared about that because it was in shreds. I had for 8 months, I had peritonitis, which is like a burst appendix, but I had 4.5 feet of burst colon. And so I had what's supposed to be a sterile cavity in your body was filled with every malodorous microorganism my sewer system could soak up. I should have remembered to put that in the book later. I didn't. Okay, well, no time for rewrites now. But so they say we're going to do one more scope, and it's going to be Dr. Dolt who does it. I'm lying on the side of a gurney, and understand that where you're sitting right now, for 5 weeks, the top doctors and residents, all the smartest people at Evanston Hospital would meet in here for what they called the case of the day. They sat right where you're sitting, and many, many, many days in a row, I was the case of the day because I was 28 and I was dying. So it's so rare. And they were neurosurgeons, people who had absolutely nothing to do with colons and gastroenterology, sat here trying to figure out what is the matter with this 28, 29-year-old woman. Why is she dying and why can't we help her? So it's just an amazing synergy, I think, isn't it? For you to be where they were, and you've got a better idea about what's supposed to happen in this universe than they did. To me, that's just, I'm sorry, I'm freaking out a little about this. Okay. Cleansing breath. Okay, so I'm lying on a gurney, and Dr. Dolt is standing next to me. They're preparing behind me. I have to lie on my left, and they're going to do the old camera thing up the bum. And so I'm lying there, and he says, we can't give you anything for the pain, because if we perforate, you'll have to go directly into surgery, whatever we gave you for pain would be competing with whatever anesthesia you would need for a surgery. I'm not a medical person, but that much I understood. And he said, you'll have to bite on a bullet. So I stuck my hand through the rails on my gurney, and I said, where's my bullet? And he said, you know, Kelly, I think under other circumstances, you would be a really entertaining woman. And I said, that's funny, doctor, because I think under any circumstances, you would still be a bad doctor. I'm gonna die. It's not the nicest thing, but I wanted him to have a little self-awareness. If I'm heading out, buckaroo, you head back into the next patient you see with a little bit of understanding. I mean, that isn't a nice thing to say, but sorry. Under any circumstances, he would still be a bad doctor. So that's not, and so He goes around to his position, and perhaps not the wisest thing ever to insult a man who's about to stick a probe up your bum. But, clearly, if you read my book, you'll know not the brightest ember in the campfire, so to speak, always. Anyway, so I'm lying there, and I am praying very, very hard. And at that point, my theology tended toward Presbyterian USA-ishism, I say, because I'd had that connection from 6 years old on with something greater than myself. And Presbyterianism, I was raised Methodist, that didn't capture it exactly. Presbyterianism didn't capture it exactly. People, little Catholic kids on my block said, my mom said, you're going to hell, but it's okay if I play with your toys. So that didn't capture it. And it's an understanding. They were informed to the extent they were informed. I don't blame them, it just was what it was. But nothing captured my experience, especially the more brushes with death I had, the less any organized religion helped inform me. But I was praying my Presbyterian prayer at that point, and it was a verse from Matthew, seek ye first the kingdom of God. And I had always thought that meant when you didn't know what to do, seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be given to you. It was, you'll know what to do, and even if you don't know what to do, you will have consulted the part of the universe that has the most likely tools at its disposal to help you. So start praying, seek ye first the kingdom of God, seek first the kingdom of God, seek, because it is I was already in horrific pain for 8 months, outrageously bad pain for 5 weeks, because it's peritonitis. This is a burst organ. So now it's going to be worse than that, he says. This will be the worst you've felt so far. So I'm clinging to the edges of this journey, seek first the kingdom of God, seek first the kingdom of God, seek first the kingdom of God, to the point it gets so painful I can't say the whole line. I just shorten to seek God, seek God, seek God, seek God, seek God, seek God, and it's so bad, it's so bad, it's so bad. And remember, I'm lying this way, and a light appears over here, goes past my face, down by my feet, and as it passes me, did you hear that? I had my microphone over here. It goes past my face, and I followed it, and came up out of me. I could still hear them working in the background. But I went in to this archway or a cabinet or an avenue between this life and that one, and instantly out of pain. Pure hope, pure joy, pure love. I had the answer to every question I have ever pondered in my whole life.
Right.
I had no fears about not living to see Libby grow up. I knew that whatever happened, she would be absolutely provided for, and I knew I would never leave her. No matter whether I died in that moment or didn't, I would never, ever leave her. We would be together on a level that I now understood, but couldn't possibly have understood before. I joked kind of that I'm a word person, as you can tell. And math is not my thing, but I know that if I had had some of my second grade teacher, Mrs. Schneider's word puzzles from second grade, if a train leaves Indianapolis going 65 miles an hour and one leaves Minden, I could have done this program. I could have done those problems in the right light. That's how amazing it is. And please don't hear me trivializing it. For me, that's a huge thing, to not be able to do math this side and just say, math? It was, I know, I'm talking the way I live with a smile on my face. It's like, it was absolute calm, absolute peace, absolute joy, absolute connection to everything and everyone that has ever been or ever will be. It's on a cellular level, more than cellular. I say I'm not a scientist either. So it's sort of, is it a cosmic level, a quantum level? I don't know what scientists call it, but on a level that didn't involve anything physical, I was connected to everything that had ever been, and I was part of that consciousness. And we all are, but in a way I had never experienced before. And probably 20 minutes in, I whooshed back out of that light. I knew what I discovered. I was not afraid to die. I knew I wouldn't die. I knew I needed a colostomy. And that whoosh, out I came, back into the same pain. Nothing, absolutely nothing had changed about my physical condition. And yet, everything had changed. Everything. And so I had to still, they discovered, Dr. Gold still didn't know everything he needed to know, but by then, the surgeon who had been standing by sort of stepped in and said, I'll take it from here. Hip check, Dr. Gold. And they come in and mark me up for the colostomy. They send an ostomy nurse in to tell me where the stoma's going to go and all this. And I was like, okay, this is a drastic lifestyle change. I used to write about to prepare other people who were facing colorectal cancer. I didn't, that job that I railed against, that I thought was the most horrific job. People would ask me at cocktail parties, so what do you do? And I'd say, I could tell you, but I'd have to kill myself. Because you don't, at 23, want to say, I write about colons and rectums and rectal bleeding. No. But that job, because I had it 5 years later, I was able to argue effectively and persuasively about my own body. I go into surgery, I come back out. Dr. Larson, his real name, the surgeon, did the surgery on me, and he said, this has been a long, he held my hand as we went into surgery. He said, this has been a long go. Let's get you well. I came out, the next thing I remember, it's 3 in the morning, and 2 of the most wonderful nurses on the planet were giving me the most soothing, healing thing they have to offer at a hospital, which is a sponge bath. I had never had one of those. Oh. In my next life, that's all I'll have. 24/7. And they were kind of rinsing me down, and just, it was this syncopated rhythm, the energy, their smell. I can remember the way the soap smelled in the basin, the way they smelled, their kind of nursey, yummy, feminine kind of smell. And I looked down, finally my eyes kind of blink open like, oh, I made it. I'm alive. Hi. And they're like, good morning, Bright Eyes. And I said, oh, I made it. They said, yes, you did. And I looked down at my stomach. And they said, would you like to see your scar? And I said, I think so. And so they undo the back of my hospital gown and lean it forward, and I go, oh! And they don't know what I'm reacting to, neither do you. I didn't have to have a colostomy. There was no stoma, there was a huge wonkin' scar, don't get me wrong, 7 inches long and a whole bunch of bad crap up here that wasn't attractive either. But I didn't have a colostomy. I said, I don't, they're like dumbstruck, like, what's the matter? You are Kelly Standing, are you? We came to the right room, and I said, I don't have a colostomy. And they said, no, you didn't need one. You had 10 centimeters, 4 inches of healthy colon. So Dr. Larson kept that. So he comes in the next morning, and I was sitting up in a chair for the first time in 5 weeks, and feeling fantastic for the first time in 8 months. And I said, I feel great. How is that possible? And he said, this is what it feels like to get a dead animal out of your body. He said, that's what your 4.5 feet of colon was. And I said, I don't have a colostomy. And he said, no. He said, you may still need one down the road, but you had 10 centimeters of colon. In my book, I call it my little engine that could colon. And he said, it hung in there. It seemed like it wanted to stay around for a while. And I said, me too. And he said, you too. Now, get this, the best other side of the story. I have 57 centimeters of colon now.
Wow.
And why is that? Because I believed I could. Jesus said, what I can do, you can do. What you think about, you bring about, right? And I just visualized my colon whole, perfect and complete, just believed and believed and believed that I could work perfectly. And I regenerated 47 original centimeters of colon. My ex-husband, notice the ex, suggested we start harvesting my organs and selling them to people who needed them. Not so much. Yeah, I'm keeping them. I might eat them, actually. So, that's essentially my story. I've had more brushes with death than that, but that's the nearest. Yes.
And does that doctor still work here?
He does not, and as the universe would have it, this is kind of fun for you to ask me that question. It's kind of interesting because when I was writing the book, so as not to run into legal troubles, I was, what will I call these people? And I say that I'm the proverbial kid who digs in every pile of manure, and somebody's watching the kid digging and like, what are you doing? Well, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere. The kid says, well, I'm that kid who digs for the ponies in the pile of manure. So I say in my book that I changed the names to protect the pony snatchers, and he was a pony snatcher. So I looked up, where is Dr. Dolt now? He was pretty old at that point. He was still practicing medicine, but I have now one of the greatest gastroenterologists truly on the planet. He's like, they're neck and neck, 1 and 2. And I bid in an auction, a silent auction, for a dinner with him and his partner, and won. We went and had dinner, and I told my story, and of course I didn't change the name to protect pony snatchers at that point. I was only on the beginnings of writing a book or thinking about writing a book. And he worked with them later. And I said, and they said, wow, and I said, so how did you experience him? And usually, if you know doctors, they tend not to rat out each other. Although Dr. Larson was amazing, he was very, very professional. He never said anything against Dr. Dolt, but he made sure my needs were met, which was great. But these two doctors, I said, so how did you experience him? And they said, about as you've described. So yes, he did. I don't know if he still is, and I asked my gastroenterologist recently if he had, if he knew where Dr. Dolt is or was, because online I found that he was still practicing, and he said no, that he understood that after he worked with them, he went off into the sunset. So. The bully. The bully who used my own jump rope to hang me from a tree. This is not satisfying, so I'm sorry to say, but my dad picked me up under one arm and had baby Patterberg dripping under the other, and my jump rope. And it was one of those jump ropes with the wooden handles. So that's one of the most vivid memories I have, is the clack, 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 clack of the wooden handles. But we went, and the smell of, I call him Danny Beckett in the book, Danny Beckett's house. But my dad, of course, pounded on the door with his, visual aids, and Danny Beckett's dad opened the door, and he was, as I remember I was 6, so he looked huge. And in my memory, which is at this point in the story somewhat murky, he was a big man in a wife beater undershirt, with kind of middle-aged with a big old pot belly, and the way I was hanging, my eyes were eye to eye with his belly button. So on right there, if my dad says, look what, and this is how I found my daughter. And he said, well, I guess that means you better keep your kid away from my kid, doesn't it? Oh, wow. Close the door. And that's, there's a theme that runs, a bit of a theme, several that runs through my book, but one of them is bullying. And I was later bullied by idle gossip, kind of something the likes of which kids today feel far more severely than I did. But, because I had a kid who spread idle gossip, but now when somebody spreads idle gossip, it's everywhere and lives forever because of the internet. But it was not a satisfying exchange between my dad and Mr. Beckett. But, and I think I make the point in my book after I talk about my own bullies later on, that I think that's part of the downside of my dad see everything as it could be, not as it is philosophy. I mean, he's very quixotic. He's like the Don Quixote. I call him the wingtip wearing sword, Don Quixote's swords wielding hero of my life, and he is, but his philosophy of see the best in everyone is a great thing, but you have to temper it with reason and with intellect and intelligence. You can't just soak up the good without bringing to bear the gift of wisdom that you have, and into allowing your intuition to tell you when people don't have your best interests at heart. And my dad, it was great that I could see that day. I was the luckiest little girl on the block, and I still believe that. But I say in the book that my dad's quixotic philosophy was both a beacon and a bludgeon through the rest of my life, because a kid told lies about me for 2 years, just unrelenting, and he was, as it turned out, he was just a misguided pain in the bum, as junior high kids can be. But unfortunately, I believe, and I have no, I can't prove this, but I think one of our classmates heard all of what this young man said. He said, Kelly Stanley's a slut, she's a whore, she'll sleep with anything. I was in 7th grade, come on. I was from St. Louis, give me a break. There may have been 7th grade whores somewhere. They were not in the south, they were not in the, central suburbs of St. Louis. I wasn't one of them. I said I couldn't have made that work. I had a school babysitting job, I had an after-school babysitting job. And then I thought, wait a minute, maybe I could have made more money his way. But I was not a whore, and I was not a slut, and I was not asleep with anything. But he said that to anyone who would listen. And I think a classmate of ours heard that he was a predator. It gave him permission to single me out as a victim. And when I was 14, I went to a party where this classmate was, and he invited me to go for a walk after the class, at the party, because it was so hot. We were dancing to Bachman Turner Overdrive. You can get pretty sweaty in your Saturday Night Fever polyester. Whoa. So yeah, I wanted to go for a walk, and we went to our school. Anyway, he attacked me then, but thanks to the swift arrival of a security guard at my high school, I was not fully aware at all of his intentions. He tried to maneuver me to the back of our school where we had a smoking lounge for students. Because in the 70s, we had two. We had one for the teachers and one for the students, believe it or not. That's how far we've come, folks, in terms of tobacco education. But I said, it's Saturday night. You can have a cigarette. If you want a cigarette, have a cigarette. You don't need to go back to the smoking lounge. Totally did not understand why it would have been a desirable thing from his perspective to go to the smoking lounge on the back of the school. I'm the luckiest little girl on the block. Birthmarks are blessings. In the moment that my dad delivered that wonderful lesson to me, a 6-year-old victim of a violent crime became the luckiest girl on the block. It's a huge gift for me, but I also didn't see the poop storms when they were right in front of me. So the kid attempts to attack me that day. I don't see it for what it is. I think it's just that sort of slappy, tickly, junior high stuff. A year later, same kid, different circumstance, jumps out from behind a bush and does what he intended to do that night to me. Self-inflicted in some ways, because I did a stupid thing. I was 15 years old and I borrowed/stole some vodka from my parents' liquor cabinet. Stupid. Went to McDonald's, mixed it with orange soda. Really stupid. Not a good recipe for a screwdriver, let me tell you. I didn't know the difference. I was unfamiliar with alcohol, and a friend and I put ourselves in harm's way. But there was some self-inflicted stuff, but you gotta be careful to lace that belief with wisdom and with intuition. There's a book by Gavin, somebody, called The Gift of Fear, and it's about how we are as a society. We have our intuition sort of socialized out of us, especially women. And we afterward, when he was a Secret Service guy, and was charged with keeping people safe and with detecting when other people didn't have other people's best interests at heart. And he talks about when he would interview rape victims and others, they would say there was a time when, if they looked back and were encouraged to see what had led to their attack, they knew there was a moment when their body, their energy, the universe tried to tell them, run, go away, don't encounter this person. And we're so polite that we'll hold a door for someone when we don't know them. We'll do the dumb thing, and we'll borrow/steal that vodka from our parents and think we're kind of cool, until somebody who means us ill sees us, impaired. That doesn't, and don't hear me saying it was really my fault. I mean, this kid was a predator, clearly, but I put myself in harm's way. So,
Who's your gastroenterologist?
Now my gastroenterologist is Dr. David T. Rubin at the University of Chicago down in Hyde Park. Best guy ever. He's the most amazing doctor, and he deserves a Nobel Prize. And I told Dr. Larson, I said, if it were in my power to grant you one, you would have a Nobel Prize on your desk today. You allowed me to live to see my daughter go to kindergarten. There are lots of pictures of me in my book. Yes.
You had mentioned something earlier about a mass murder.
A mass murder, yes. Well, you're gonna it's gonna be spoiler alert, if you wanna read the book. You may wanna wait, but I won't do that to you, because Oprah hates that when people do that, if they say, no, read about it in my book. There was a mass murder in St. Louis in 1980 at Pope's Cafeteria. And that was the place I started working there on my 16th birthday, because I was tired of making so little as a babysitter. But I think it was like 50 cents an hour in those days. And I could go to a cafeteria for the heady rewards of serving vegetables for $1.35 an hour. That's what I made. And I had just gone back to college, and I described the friends I made there, and my manager and the people with whom I became very close, because you can imagine if things at school were I had to go to school every day with my rapist. I never told anybody. I was ashamed. It was horrible. And his friends, for whatever reason, decided that they would torment me. So they would jump out from behind doors and say, they'd wait till they saw me coming and go, I'm gonna rape you. It's not funny. I mean, it was horrifying because it was true. I mean, they were choosing to back up their friend, but it was horrific. I mean, I know how I got through. I got through our family motto is persevere. My dad's English, so if you're going through hell, keep going. So saith Winston Churchill, right? But it was a daily hell. So having a job at Pope's Cafeteria where I wore a little hairnet and mixed and mingled with these great people, they said I got everything I needed, vegetables and validation at Pope's Cafeteria. And then the bug spray guy came and killed all of my coworkers. The person who had replaced me, because I had just gone back to college, and my manager and 2 others at Pope's. And I think they had security cameras everywhere, but because he had been the bug spray guy, I'm pretty sure the manager would have just let him in thinking that's what he was there for. Instead, he stole $4,000 from the safe at Pope's and fled to Florida, and he bragged to his second wife. He was married to a woman he didn't bother to divorce with her. He married the second one and had a child with her, and he said, I killed 3. He thought he had only killed 3 people. He killed 4. He shot the 4th one through both eyes because she saw him and he didn't want her to say what she had seen. She lingered in a coma for 10 days. And he went to Florida, bragged to his second wife, I killed 3 people to be with you. And she called the FBI and said, I don't think I want to be with somebody who would kill 3 people to be with me. I was like, well, who do you think? Well, good for you, I'm going to call him. So 9 years later, he was put to death in the state of Missouri. He was found, he was tried for capital murder in all 4 cases, and he was convicted and then killed. I believe it was legal injection. And I'm not saying that's satisfying, I'm just saying it is. You know, he was clearly I'm kind of, if you've read any of that hurt people stuff, he had to have been a hurt person. I think anybody who's ever hurt me was a hurt person, and that's why they do it. So it gives you some compassion. I'm working on the better, not bitter stuff. So. But I walk around, I've had a phenomenal life, and you can laugh. I mean, if you can be hit by a car, struck by lightning, survive a mass murder, hanged from a tree, and come out smiling, still standing. I'm still here, that's right, I'm still standing, baby. So, but this has been an honor and a privilege. I'm so grateful that you were willing to hear my story for the very first time. Any other questions? Yes.
You still got your Patty Bird?
She disappeared in one of the numerous moves over the years, but for my 50th birthday, which was last year, my daughter went on eBay and found me a baby Patterberg. And she said, there were several apparently online, and she said, the reason I chose the one I did because it said, It had an unblemished body.
No birthmark.
No birthmarks. So I said, oh, well, they're not as valuable. But I mean, hear what my dad said. I mean, he was saying he really acted as if I needed to be careful about her feelings and about not to hurt her feelings and to remember he said, how all she has been through today. I mean, he was so self-sacrificing. And understand, my parents have been married, it'll be 55 years in February. And he has, they say, the greatest gift a man can give his children is to love their mother. And my dad has given us that unparalleled gift and is wholehearted, full-throated, not just when he feels like it. I mean, every day his mission is to make our mother happy. And she makes it worth his while. So. I don't know what I Oh my gosh! See, you get the unrehearsed. This is, what do they call it when it's unleashed or unplugged? Kelly Standing, unplugged. Or uncensored. No, I mean, no. They both have genius IQs, 146. They tied. They took a test in the mid-70s, but they're completely different. And they tied. And my mom is like read a book and have a great glass of wine and decorate and create wonderful parties and conversation. And my dad is, bodily function and kind of work on a car, go camping kind of guy. And together, I call him a hockey skate and a feather duster. And my mom is the hockey skate. And it's like Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother, but with a British and German accent. So they're fantastic. And yeah, so know that my dad, in telling me, he lived what he urged me to see in baby Patibert, that people's scars make them more beautiful, not less so. And that's a big chunk of what broke up my marriage, is that my ex believed that I was unlovable after I had all those scars. He believed that beforehand, but he claimed that was the thing that put it over. He said, ever since you've been sick, I haven't found you attractive. Which was hard until I realized hurt people. And he had lost interest on day 4 of our honeymoon. I'll spare you that part. And I don't go into much detail about that. There's a chapter, standing beside the man of my dreams, watching him become a nightmare. But it's really, it's not as bad as it sounds. I just, it's context. I said, Elizabeth Gilbert in Eat, Pray, Love said she doesn't think it would be right to talk about her ex-husband, her now ex-husband's issues in her book, and that she doesn't expect anybody to believe that she's capable of delivering an unbiased account of their story. And I said, I really applaud her approach, and let's just be clear, I'm not her, although it would not break my heart to sell as many books as she has. But she tells her story from the perspective when her husband was in her rearview mirror. I mean, it's after him. I had my brushes with death when he was either right at the center of the storm, as with the bright light, or on the outskirts, as in the lightning strike. So he was there, and I can't tell my story as if he doesn't exist. And I have not attempted to make him out as a villain. I've attempted to make us both out as flawed human beings, which is what each of us is. But we are also whole, perfect, and complete in whatever we are every single day.
It was absolutely wonderful, Kelly. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing, and I'm sure this is just the first of many tellings you're going to be doing, especially after you get the book out. When is it coming out?
I'll have hardcovers on December 14th, and then it'll technically really be available on January 1st. Because I've lost 110 pounds. And kept it off for 6 years, and I've kept it off for good for a wonderful new reason. I took it off a conventional way, kept it off with an unconventional attitude. But
January is a great, new lease on life kind of month. And so those who know these things better than I do say that's my most marketable story. I'm thinking they haven't been here yet. So we're pitching it in January because People Magazine will say, I lost a whole person, and I can say, me too, including me. I lost me, and I came back, and then, but I didn't. So that's part of, you gotta do the marketing thing.
Thank you again.